Hello, beautiful people.
Are you ready to start?
Why not?
Let's roll.
Hello, beautiful people. Today we have on Daniel Hodges. I just wanted to give you his bio before we hop into the conversation with him. And he also introduces himself and what he does and advocates in his disabilities, things like that. But I just wanted to give this little blurb about Daniel leading up to it. Daniel Hodges is a thought leader on accessibility and authentic inclusion of people with disabilities. Daniel is the president and co-founder of Pieces of Me Foundation, which is a nonprofit that he started while he was in law school. The mission of Pieces of Me Foundation is to transform society through community education, innovative professional training, and connections to relevant resources that break the stigma surrounding disabilities of all kinds. As an individual who lives with multiple disabilities himself, he understands firsthand how vital this work is. Daniel received his Juris Doctorate from the University of Baltimore and his Master's in Healthcare Administration from Western Governors University. He was born blind as well with other disabilities like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and growing up, the school system assumed that he was incapable of learning enough to become a fully functioning adult. This ultimately led to a situation where he missed out on grades 7th through 11th grade. Thus, the idea that he would end up with multiple advanced degrees was inconceivable to the most of the adults in his life. He says, as someone who lives with chronic pain and mental health struggles, I have found the beauty in serving as a means for survival. I know what it means to fight for opportunities and defy expectations on the path to becoming what we are meant to be. Moreover, I know what it means to soothe out our own pain by helping someone in need reclaim the hope that they deserve. I feel blessed for having the chance to help people step into their brilliance and facilitate changes within organizations that unleash the best in their people. In my mind, these are two sides of the same coin. So that is a little bit about Daniel. I want to read just a little piece about Pieces of Me, which is, again, his nonprofit that he's the president and co-founded. Pieces of Me works to eliminate stigma associated with disability, physical difference, and chronic illness by providing resources and connections to individuals and families and appropriate training to professionals in these spheres. So again, that's just a little blurb about Daniel and his mission and purpose that he strives to make the world and America and everyone, even local communities, more inclusive to people with disabilities. And now I have more resources for myself and my listeners and community. And I just can't thank Daniel enough for having this conversation. I hope you all enjoy and let me know what you think. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of Digital Activism. Today, I'm here with Daniel Hodges, and I'm going to let him introduce himself, actually. So, first, how are you, Daniel?
I'm doing okay. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. Listen to it rain, thunderstorm, hoping the power doesn't go out.
There you go.
Yeah. So, I do want to acknowledge, and it's a funny reason why. And I say funny because he said it's funny first. This is an audio only episode, and I'm gonna let Daniel explain why.
Yeah, so I am blind and I also have a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos. And what ended up happening is as I was shaving in preparation for being on camera today, I ended up having one of those moments where my razor and my very touchy skin did not play nice. And so I've been trying for the last hour at this point to get myself to stop bleeding. And we were laughing about this before hitting the record button, because I was saying, a lot of people, if they say, oh, he cut himself shaving, aside from the fact that men do it all the time, um, would assume that it must be a visual thing. It's like, no, it has nothing to do with vision. It has everything to do with the fact that my skin is very velvety and very fragile, and I have a tendency, once I start bleeding, it's very hard to stop. Part of my Ehlers-Danlos. So we thought we would bring that up from the top as just an object lesson of some of the assumptions that we often deal with and the misconceptions that are out there.
which are the most annoying things. Um, it's like the simple little things, you know. It's not the or it's never what they think, you know. Kind of what you were saying. It's not because we do it all the time, shaving or you know, being blind or having low vision. It's something you wouldn't even consider. And it's always like the invisible disabilities or the ones that are not always presenting that cause all the weird little quirks.
That is so true.
So I'm gonna let you introduce yourself.
Awesome. So I am the president and co-founder of Pieces of Me Foundation. We spell it PEACES of me, and we'll probably get to why that is later in the episode. I am somebody who holds a law degree, and I also hold a master's in healthcare administration. But the reason I love doing podcasts like this is because if you hear those credentials, you would probably have certain assumptions regarding how I was brought up, the resources I had at my disposal. Maybe we talk about privilege, that sort of thing. And I want to back that up and say, wait a minute, I actually was taught all of my childhood and teenage years that my ability to succeed was contingent upon getting my vision, quote unquote, restored. And if that didn't happen, that I would never be able to go to school, have a job, have a family, etc., etc. As a matter of fact, when I was living in South Carolina as a teenager, a supposed blindness professional sat my parents down and said, "Well, sorry, but all he'll ever be able to do is cane chairs." And that came on the heels of me actually missing 5 years of my K-12 education entirely. So I love having conversations like this, and I do the work that I do because so often what we assume is really off the mark. And until we address those underlying misconceptions, it's going to be impossible for us to create real solutions that actually move the ball forward. That's my work in a nutshell. I'm just glad to be here with you today.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Okay, so you touched on a couple of things. The school situation. You said you just came back from 5 years off from school. Is that what you were saying?
No, so when I was in my um, preteen and early teen years, after sixth grade, my parents were going to attempt to homeschool me, but the resources were inaccessible, and they found themselves unable to find help. The public school hadn't reached out to the School for the Blind, so they didn't have any training in Braille or White Key or anything. Those things were not available to me until much later, and there were no accessible homeschool materials. So that, among other things, led to me actually missing seventh, eighth, all but 1 month in ninth, 10th, and 11th grades completely.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so then during the summer between my 11th and 12th grade years, my sister found the School for the Blind in Idaho, and we were able to get me enrolled there, and that's where I was first introduced to Braille and a white cane and assistive technology, all of that stuff. It's also the first time I had ever crossed paths with anyone else who was blind or low vision.
So I do want to touch on that because seeing people for the first time with a similar disability or same medical devices or assistive devices is such a almost like for me at least is such like a euphoric feeling of like I'm seen, you know.
Yeah.
It's not just me. So you learned to use assistive devices much later than you know most blind or low vision kids, right?
Yeah.
So, was that a struggle having to learn it later on than early on?
I think there is some residual difficulty there because um I came to it later, and at the same time there was a real hunger to learn these things once I was finally exposed to them just because I had, you know, really struggled to find a way to succeed without masking. I had spent so much time trying to be a broken sided person that when I finally was exposed to JAWS and Braille and a white cane, and I started to understand the power that was there, I was kind of insatiable. I mean, I dove headfirst into learning uh, how to use a screen reader. I dove headfirst into how to using Braille, and um, I went from never holding a white cane before to um, being able to go anywhere in the country I wanted to and travel wherever I wanted to. I made that leap within less than 2 years.
The feeling of freedom and independence is like I imagine if you could remember, like anyone could remember their first steps as a little kid, that would be and could comprehend it. That would be like the same feeling, or like first time crawling, or like a teenager when they get to drive for the first time, or whatever it may be. Like that sense of freedom, but it lasts almost forever because you're always learning new devices and new techniques and what works for you and adapting, and disabilities change and things like that. And so that feeling is like almost like a continual boost of confidence. At least it was for me. Do you, if you don't mind me asking, what do you still, or what devices do you still use in terms of assistive devices?
So for the most part, like if I'm traveling, I use a long white cane, and I will occasionally use a mobility cane as well if I'm having a really bad situation with my joints. Um, I'll also say, even though this is a little bit more controversial, I actually do a meet and assist at the airport because even though I'm capable of finding my own way, the number of unnecessary steps I am likely to take while exploring is something I'm just not willing or able to do if I'm having a bad pain day. And there's been more times lately where if somebody says erroneously, "Oh, you're blind, you need a wheelchair," where I would have fought that on principle earlier in my life, I'm like, you know what? If I've got a swollen knee or a swollen foot or a hip that's grinding against itself, I'm just gonna say forget it. I'm not gonna fight with you on the technicalities. I'll take the free ride, and
Yeah.
I'll save my my bravado for a different day.
It's exhausting trying to justify, defend, or fight in terms
Yeah,
of, disability, accessibility, all those things. But like, unfortunately, unfortunately, all disabled people have to do it, but especially the ones that feel comfortable doing it almost don't get a break. So people that do podcast or talk in person or fight accessibility on a school campus, or just in their town or home or whatever, it's like once they start, they don't get to stop hardly. Um, and it's kind of sad. Like they need a break too.
that's true, and I think for those of us who do it, it's so important to have good self-care practices, and it's so important to have boundaries and to be able to give your mind, your heart, your soul a break because as you said, it's exhausting. I know this is the third podcast I've done this week, and also I had a meeting yesterday with a group of gentlemen who were looking at building an inclusive community, and their heart's in the right place, but their level of knowledge isn't there. And I applaud them for making the effort to bring somebody like me into the conversation. Don't get me wrong. And I enjoy doing podcasts like this, but at the same time, there's going to be a baseball game I'll be listening to here in a few hours just because I need something to actively turn my brain off and to be able to recharge.
Yep, I will be playing video games after this, or watching my cousin graduate on video. It is that balance. And like I was able to look at my calendar and like fill it up for the next couple weeks, and then I was like, why did I do that to myself? Why did I do it that much? Why didn't I space it out a little more? And so going forward, it will not be this busy. Um, it happens so fast, but yeah, that boundary and your mental health priority, because like everybody needs, of course, absolutely take care of their mental health, and they have their own um, things that are important that they need to focus on. But disabled people and people with chronic illnesses, and minorities in general, I think, have an extra level of stuff that they have to take care of in terms of mental health. That's sometimes it's hard to find the resource, sometimes it's hard to find the community, but it is so important. And so a lot of that is, the boundaries, the not overworking yourself, the turning your brain off, whether it be sports, video games, sleep, podcasts, like listen to a podcast, or I like to learn, but not anything related to disability. Like
Yep.
give me just random fun facts, or give me a podcast on whatever else that has nothing to do, or like I'll even do my real estate classes as long as it has nothing to do with like the community I'm in and I advocate for and work alongside, then I'm okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the same for me. Give me history or business podcasts, or things that maybe are tangential a lot of the time, because I want to still be engaged, but
Mm,
you know um something that is something that allows me to feel like I'm benefiting, but also it's not contributing to burnout.
exactly. Okay, so you mentioned this a minute ago, and it made me think, and I've realized I never thought about this combined. You said that you use a white cane, but sometimes if you have a flare up, you use mobility cane. Um, I realized that those are very much not the same thing. And if you needed them both, do they make one that are like, is it like that's like a combo of both, or do you use both? Like, how do you do that? That's a very random, probably very stupid question, but
No,
I
no.
realized I never thought about it.
Yeah, so it is there may be combos out there. I just kind of have a piecemeal set up. So what I'll usually do if I can is I'll be using my long white cane, my vision related cane in my right hand, and if I can, I'll be using my mobility cane in my left hand, and trying to walk in a coordinated fashion so that I'm getting the feedback I need and also not tying myself in knots. And it's usually doable. I will say though, when I've had situations like coming out after surgery where I'm maybe using a mobility walker or trying to use a wheelchair, those are tough. There are multiply disabled people out there who are very successful at that. My understanding is they've had a fair amount of training. I've never had any formal training on how to do that, and so it's don't follow my example would be probably the most cogent way I can put
That's fair. Yeah, no, you're talking about training with wheelchairs. I was in a manual wheelchair when I was young. They brought it to the house, and my physical therapist showed me what to do, and I never did it quite right. I always want to do it myself. So you're supposed to hold the metal rod on the outside of the wheels to push yourself. I grabbed the wheels. My hands were always dirty.
it.
I wouldn't wear the gloves. It was just the whole thing. And then power chair, they're like, why are you so good, oddly good at this? And then my dad popped up and he's like, it's because he plays video games. And
Yep.
so it was the playing video games and that coordination with the joysticks that helped. Even then, it was still difficult. But yeah, it takes a lot. And by the time you learn one, they change it from a rear wheel drive to a mid wheel drive or a front wheel drive or a this thing at the other, or it handles differently or whatever it may be. So it's like you will always be learning how to use a mobility aid or assistive device.
Back in 2019, I was out in out in Vegas for a convention, and I was having a really bad flare in one of my feet. And of course, Vegas convention halls are not small venues. And
Mm-mm.
so they were able to find me a super long white cane. It was like 7 or 8 feet long, and procured the use of a power chair for me to be able to get around and do this. And it's, I figured it out. It wasn't as bad as it could have been. And also on the same front, you could say it was a small miracle I didn't kill anybody. So, there is that.
If they're in your way, that's on them. That's what I say. If they're in my way and you see me coming, that's on you.
Yep. Oh, it
um,
was, yeah.
so you mentioned this briefly before we started recording, and it's in your bio here. We can totally cut this out if you don't want to talk about it. But you talked about your children having cancer and having to go through that. Are you okay talking about that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So how you said both of them, correct? Two of your kids?
2 out of 3, yeah.
Two out of three.
So my ex-wife had a rare form of eye cancer called retinoblastoma, and we
Okay.
knew that it was hereditary. And we had done some preliminary legwork to make sure that if they were born with it, we would be prepared because we knew that RB always happens within the first few years of life. In the bilateral sense, with hereditary sense, it usually happens in the first couple of years of life.
Mhm.
We knew that based on their mom's case, it would probably occur much, much earlier than that. And as it so happened with Heather, our daughter, our firstborn, she actually had her first diagnosis, or her first tumor was spotted within her first week of life.
Oh wow.
And we were starting to have her getting treatment within the first 2 weeks. Um, we were able to find the right team and find her the right treatment. We familiarized ourselves with the literature of the different treatment protocols, and she actually came out, exceedingly well, much better than most of her peers. A lot of times with bilateral retinoblastoma, it is commonplace for a child to lose at least one eye based on that in the service of just making sure that it doesn't metastasize to the brain. In
Mhm.
her case and in her brother's case, they actually both kept each of them kept both of their eyes. And
Oh wow.
as it so happens, Heather is actually driving now, and Dom will be when he's of age.
Oh, that's amazing. So they're all good, like clear
Yeah.
bill of health in terms of the cancer.
Yes, although with this particular cancer, they are at a heightened risk of getting a second malignancy just
Hmm.
based off of both the genetic factors and also the treatment. And I think that's what people don't often think about, particularly with pediatric cancer, is that, beating the original cancer is obviously first and foremost, but the latent effects from both the disease and then also the anesthesia, the chemo, whatever other tools you use,
Hmm.
they're, pediatric cancer, even in remission, is itself a chronic condition of sorts.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know like the long term and after effects of whether it be the treatment or the cancer itself or just the process along the way. Like I am fortunate to, I mean, I haven't experienced it personally. However, my dad, he um had a very rare cancer that literally men in their 40s get, and he was a man and he was 40. And
Hmm.
it was in his mouth. It's called adenoid cystic carcinoma, and it was super rare. But typically when like the more, I guess, common cancers, you do like 10 years of, or what, 5 to 10 years of follow up after you're in remission, um, just to check up. His was 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
just to be sure because it was so rare. And the next time it would be in like brain, lungs, heart area. And so, does that cause? I know it does for my family more. I know it does for me, being his son. But does that cause, as a parent and knowing the pain that I mean, even you go through with chronic illnesses, does that give you like a heightened? Like, are you always worried about that? Is that something in the back of your mind?
Absolutely, because especially with RB, they will be followed by an oncologist for the rest of their lives.
Okay.
And um, so yeah, I think when you think about it, whether it's um, if somebody starts having too many headaches or memory loss, or if somebody starts having a joint that's acting out or acting differently than it should be, or somebody starts feeling fatigue, you don't just think, okay, maybe it's the flu, or maybe they just, twisted their knee or whatever. You you automatically have to roll out a second malignancy if anything starts to be persistent. And you know, fortunately, we've got three pediatric cancer survivors between them and their mom, and nobody's had a
Mhm.
second malignancy. But yeah, you're always thinking about not only monitoring, but you're also thinking about, okay, where are we living in relationship to having a good cancer specialist around? Because you can't just go to your local cancer center down the street if you're in, let's say, Boise, Idaho, and assume that they understand what this, as soon as they understand what retinoblastoma includes. You have to get
Yeah.
some fairly specialized care.
And especially like I cannot imagine even with my like SMA and my kidney issue that I have and like all the stuff that is very much more common than and less serious as a rare cancer. But I cannot imagine moving out of state long term and having to move all the files and then re-find the new people and then re-explain because everybody's diagnosis and experiences are so individualized. And I think a lot of able-bodied people, maybe even a lot of doctors and medical individuals and in the medical industry don't understand that. It's not just look in a book, oh, this, and this happened. It's yeah, these things are symptoms or these things happen, but like what do you experience? And that's
Absolutely.
just a hard thing to have to transfer.
Yeah, and when the kids were younger, um, there was that balance of trying to find a place that was affordable and also had good health care. And then because neither parent drove, we were also looking for somewhere that had, some sort of good mass transit. This is back before Uber and Lyft and Instacart were ubiquitous. And so it took a lot of trial and error. We never quite found what we were looking for. Just tried to make the best out of what we could. But to your point, I was thinking about when Dom, our youngest, was born, we actually were trying to get him the proper screening that he needed, and we had the protocols on our side. We knew our stuff, and the head of the ophthalmology department at a children's hospital in the Pacific Northwest actually got into quite the argument with us because they were saying, "Oh, well, I don't see anything. Come back in 6 months," and we're like, "No, try two
Mm-mm.
weeks." And we ended up getting a referral to Philadelphia to get a second opinion and to get things back on track,
Oh wow.
which meant we had to fly across the country. This whole thing happened on Thursday. We were in Philadelphia Monday morning, and it actually ended up with us getting a letter from the hospital saying you're no longer welcome in our oncology and ophthalmology departments. And I'm like, wait a minute, y'all screwed up,
Is
not
that
us.
legal? Is that legal to deny service to someone at a hospital? First off. Like, or a
It's
doctor's
tricky.
office, I guess. I don't, that feels discriminatory, but I'm not a
Well,
lawyer.
once once the referral was made, um, once the referral was made, they no longer had a duty of care to that patient. So technically, it was legal. Now, whether it's ethical or not, that's a whole nother question.
So legal but shitty.
Pretty much.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That seems that's what it seems. And I want to here in just a second talk about um, Pieces of Me Foundation. However, while we're on the topic of your kids and the cancer diagnosis and things like that, do you mind talking about? Because I have it here that you nearly lost custody of your first child due to disability discrimination. Can you talk about what happened with that, if you don't mind?
Absolutely. That's a great segue into the other. So, going back to when my ex wife was pregnant with Heather, we were living in Denver at the time. We're both in our early 20s. And like I was saying, we're looking for making sure that we had all of the safeguards in place in case we had to deal with cancer right off the bat. And we had actually started off in one major hospital in the Denver metro doing the OB there. And then Heather's mom was like, I don't feel right here. Something feels off. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I trust your instincts. I don't feel anything. Something feels off here too. So we did what we thought was the right thing. What probably was the right thing, knowing that blindness discrimination happens in parenting. And we said, okay, we're seeing the writing on the wall. We're not going to be a statistic. And we went and we vetted another hospital in the Denver metro. And they answered all the questions. They checked all the boxes. They made it seem like they were happy to have us aboard. Everything seemed safe and comfortable and non threatening until we get into the delivery room, and then everything starts coming apart. And what actually ended up happening is they're openly questioning our ability to parent. They're observing, on one hand, she's nursing successfully, her diapers are getting changed. We're answering all the questions about how to take a take a temperature and change a diaper, all of these things. There was nothing that they could point to as an indication of neglect. However, because they could not wrap their heads around two blind people parenting, they actually held us in the hospital for an extra day while they waited for grandma to get back from Idaho because she was going to be visiting for another week or two. They waited to release us until grandma was back. And then when we got back to our apartment, there's a note on the door saying, "This is from Child Protective Services. We'll be back." And as it turned out, the morning that we went to go get her first eye exam, before we could even deal with that, we were meeting with the CPS worker who walked in and thankfully said, you know what, this place is relatively clean for just having a newborn. And, there's no drug paraphernalia in here. There's no drug orders in here. Why am I here? And she sits down, opens up her case file and says, you got to be kidding me. I'm here based on 3 referrals simply because you're blind. Um,
Nurses and doctors, probably.
a couple of nurses and a social worker.
Oh wow.
Um, um, she said, look, Colorado law requires me to keep a case open for X amount of time. So I have no choice but to come out every once in a while and visit you. However, I want you to know that I think this referral is crap. And you can think of me as an ally. I'll bring you diapers. I'll bring you baby clothes. Just I'm here to support you. And
Yeah.
we we were able to trust her with a considerable amount of effort. Because if you think about it, our trust was just broken. One of those referring nurses it turned out, had been our home nurse during the pregnancy, who had come in and seen the state of the apartment, who had come in and talked with us, knew about our assistive, knew about our alternative techniques and assistive technology, and still, like, the reason that nurse put on a referral was I made her uncomfortable because I had a tendency to pace around the room. And I'm like, we talked about the fact that I
Hey, guess
have
what? That's
chronic
normal.
pain, and so I walk sometimes to get my to get my mind off my foot pain. Somehow
Yeah.
that got used against me. Um, but fortunately, she was able to earn our trust and actually did become an ally. But at the same time, I think your audience will empathize with this. It only takes one bad apple for you to have an incredibly difficult time trusting other professionals who say they come in peace.
On social media, especially if a disabled individual is posting and they have a child, that oftentimes due to ableism online, and it's most of the time not justified. They're calling child protective services. They're calling, we see it on a broader scale of non disabled individuals, like able bodied, like just streamers get, you know, the FBI or a bomb threat called in on their own house while they're live. It happens unfortunately very frequently because people are sick and twisted. But then it trickles down to disabled people getting child protective services because people believe that they shouldn't have kids or they're not getting the adequate care when they're probably getting cared better for than a lot of kids where uh, CPS needs to focus their time and not waste their time on people that don't need it, you know?
Absolutely. And one thing I learned well after the fact is that only only a handful of states actually have explicit protections to preserve the rights of disabled parents. And
Hmm.
as I looked into it, a lot of people assume that their state has more protections than it does because, let's say, Wisconsin was a place I looked into, for instance, where the law says that a social worker or a caseworker has to reasonably believe that the child is in danger. And to an advocate like us, we would say, well, no social worker would reasonably believe that based on simply the presence of a disability. Okay, here's the problem with that. It's not about what we would believe. It's
Mm-hmm.
about what they would believe given their training, given their exposure, and when you think about the fact that they have not been trained on the capabilities of parents with disabilities, and given the overall social structure you just got done talking about, there is a world as ignorant and as screwed up as it is. There's a world where doubting our abilities would actually be seen as the reasonable position.
Yeah, because you get like again, like you were saying, one bad apple. You get one a person that has biases against disabled individuals because they were never taught or trained or experienced it, or maybe they did have a bad experience with a disabled parent one time. They're gonna assume it's for you know all disabled parents, or they just think "Oh my goodness, I couldn't imagine. I would feel so bad." Like again,
Yeah,
their
yeah,
bias just feeds into their, and that's why with the whole ADA, it says reasonable accommodations that aren't a burden to finances or whatever the terms are. That's so subjective. Like
yep.
to me, a financial burden's more than $100, but to a business it may be $10,000. Um, it's so subjective, and you can always make it justified if you really want to. And if it only takes one person to take a child away, which it is, then all it takes is them having a bias or just untrained and uneducated, which is so sad.
Yeah, and as it so happens, my cousin and co-founder for Pieces is a trained social worker. Um, that's the field she was working on before she had to medically retire and ended up doing Pieces with me. And we were we talked about that on a number of occasions, as well as conversations I've had with other people who are in the healthcare or behavioral health field, and the level of exposure they get for this sort of circumstance is negligible to non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you're looking at a system that hasn't prepared people to make those decisions from an informed or rational basis. Plus, you're putting them in a high stakes, high stress environment where the consequences of getting things wrong can be sometimes life or death. Plus, you're giving them a lot more liability than you are tools. And then finally, you're you're sticking people in a system that is overwhelming, under resourced, and contributing to burnout. What do you think is going to happen in that case?
Yep. It's interesting because whenever I would go to the hospital, you know, there's one major hospital here in North Georgia, like system, and then there's some other smaller ones, and it's so interesting because whenever I would go, whether it be for emergency, CT scan, an X-ray, whatever it may be, 99% of the staff there and the nurses and whoever do not know how to use a Hoyer lift. I have to have a
Mm.
Hoyer lift transfer, especially before, like, I used to, like, I've lost weight because it was starting my body. I just really needed it. But, like, previously, I was like, there's no way somebody's picking me up. It would hurt me. It would hurt them. It would really hurt me. That's a liability. Usually, they can't pick anybody up anyway, unless it's with a sheet or they can transfer themselves. It's just like so many, and it's just riskier for everyone involved. But they don't know how to use a lift, so it's my parents teaching the nurses or just doing it for them how to use a Hoyer lift, how to use it appropriately. We hope they have one. I've been to a hospital that doesn't have one. I've been to one that they had to go search it down. I had to wait 15 minutes. Um, then another hospital, they have a dedicated lift team that do it, which is great. But then for budget cuts, they got rid of the slings, so they don't have a sling, but they have a whole lift team. So you got to like provide your own. Like, what is that? it's
Wow.
it makes no sense. And like they need my aunt is a nurse. She's gone back so many times. Like she's the highest level you can be without being a doctor, essentially. And she's like, you don't get trained on a Hoyer lift. And if they do, it's usually they work in a nursing home, geriatric facility, something like that, not just in the hospital. I've had nurses argue, say, get over it. I've had them, like, I've had so many different situations. And again, it goes back to it's not necessarily on them, it's on the system, not like their education and like the system that educates them not doing their part for something I feel like is so basic. Um, and that goes for most things. But yeah, that's just a very specific one that I regularly have issues with.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that too, um you mentioned the budget cuts and whatever and getting rid of the sling, and my lawyer brain and my MHA brain went to this financial quotient and said, wait a minute, you're going to cut that out of the budget and risk a $10 million lawsuit that you will most assuredly lose? What fiscal, equation are you looking at?
Yeah, it just like one, I don't think the medical like hospitals should have to worry about budgeting or like budget cuts. I mean, like that should not be their, like they should be supported in a way that they do not have to. I mean, this is someone who doesn't work in the medical field. Let me clarify, but it feels like something that should be like the last thing in their mind, you know. Um, but beyond that, yeah, like I don't. I mean, I don't even know what would be better to budget cut. This is because I only know my, personal experience. But yeah, no, not having a Hoyer lift or having one and a lift team for the entire hospital. There's like 3 or 4 people, an entire team dedicated to it. That's the only thing they do. But then they don't have the slings. Makes zero sense. And don't tell the patient ahead of time before the appointment.
Absolutely.
I don't understand it. But going from that, I know I've already like held you hostage for 40 minutes. I'm so sorry. Um,
It's okay.
um, transitioning from that, I want to talk about your foundation, Pieces of Me, PEACES of Me, right?
Yep.
Yeah, got it right. Okay, making sure. Tell me about it. Like, what was the motivation for it? What I have the. Let me read this here. It says, "Pieces of Me works to eliminate stigma associated with disability, physical difference, and chronic illness by providing resources and connections to individuals and families, and appropriate training to professionals in these spheres." We really did like segue that really well. I didn't even mean to.
Yeah, yeah. So this came about when I had been watching both myself and a lot of people I cared about falling through the cracks with both the hospital systems and the advocacy systems, and just getting to the point where I was ready to start shaking my fist.
Hmm.
And at the same time, my cousin Christy had medically retired due to her own chronic pain from behavioral health, and had also had a daughter who was born with an unexpected limb difference. And we were talking about that, and she said, I'm a trained social worker. And I watched another social worker walk into to the to the hospital room after my daughter was born, and not have any clue where to send my husband and I for help with this, with her limb difference. And said, this is ridiculous. I said, yeah, you're right. And this is a common thing, whether it's limb difference or blindness or mobility or whatever the case may be. Underneath all of these different disabilities and differences, there's a series of misconceptions and a real disconnect between people and the resources they need access to. And we talked about it. You know what? I'm not doing this by myself, especially between in my first and second year of law school.
Ooh.
But I'll head this up if you'll take this journey with me. And fortunately, she said yes. And we spelled pieces, PEACES, first because we wanted people to understand that having a disability does not equal broken. So we wanted to say, hey, as you learn to lean into your gifts and talents and embrace who you are, there's real peace, there's real affirmation that comes from that. And we wanted to start from that standpoint. And it eventually evolved into us saying, we believe that access is a human right, and we are firm on that principle, but we don't believe you have to start burning stuff down to prove your points.
Yeah.
So we are, on one hand, very fervent advocates, and yet we are also an organization that really prioritizes meeting people where they are and calling them in. So when we're meeting with medical professionals or business owners or nonprofit leaders, clergy, whoever it is, our first thing is we say, look, first of all, thank you for having the humility and the willingness to meet with us. And by virtue of you taking that step, there's grace here. There's the ability for you to ask the difficult, maybe even indelicate questions. There's the ability for you to set aside your fear of saying something and having it come out sideways. We're not here to judge you on that. We're simply here to help you understand the value of what real inclusion and accessibility brings to the table, and then we're here to help you create a plan that is replicable, sustainable, and relevant to you regarding how you can implement best practices into whatever you're doing. Because if we give an organization feedback and that feedback is so extreme or off the mark that it puts them out of business the next day, we have not done our jobs. Our job is to weave these things into their culture in a way that becomes self-perpetuating. And that's what we try to do with pieces.
I am obsessed with pieces of me. Everybody go check it out. That's such a funny sentence for me to say as well. That sounds like so self-absorbed. um, Everyone go check it out. The link to the website and information, and actually all of Daniel's links will be in show notes and description. There is a business owner or someone that has some say so at a company, whether it be a small business, big business that's listening right now. What is one inexpensive way that they can? What is one inexpensive thing rather that they can do and their job and company can do to be more inclusive to um, everyone, but disabled individuals specifically?
I always say it starts by taking steps toward creating a culture where everyone has the ability to show up as the best version of themselves. I can give you all the instruction in the world on accommodations and on creating belonging and all of these other things. It will not land unless you have a culture that is built on trust, that is built on harvesting the best out of your people, that is built on using, design thinking or some other form of continuous improvement. If you don't have those things in place, there's there's really it won't stick. But if you do have those things in place, if you've got some sort of continuous improvement strategy, if you're teaching people how to think outside the box and problem solve, then you've already got probably 80% of the problem solved, and we can go fix the other 20.
See, being welcoming and putting effort in is free, everybody. That's all you gotta do is start. The initiative to start, I feel like, is one of the hardest things and most important things for people to do, not in just this situation, but in most situations where it involves change. Excuse me, I feel like a lot of people get nervous or just don't know where to begin. So getting started, I always like if someone makes an effort, I always applaud them, and then be like, okay, now let's keep going.
Yeah, I mean it's basic. It's basic psychology, right? It's nothing more than using the power of of positive feedback. That's what we're taught to do in every relationship is use positive feedback and positive reinforcement. That's really all it is.
Yeah, exactly. So if someone wants to work with Pieces of Me or you or just talk to you, where can they find you?
So, heading over to piecesofme.org, and there's a special spot on the website called the Access Opportunity Tour. And it is where you can come and get really what I think is one of a kind training for your organization of any size, nonprofit, for profit, house of worship, town government, we don't care. It's it's all about helping you create a culture. If you want to connect with me individually, you can either drop me a line on the website, there's a contact us feature that I will definitely see, or you can reach out to me, Daniel Hodges, JDMHA on LinkedIn. And I would encourage your audience, let's get connected. Let's continue this conversation. And one of the reasons I do shows like this is to expand my personal network and to look for more collaborations. So if this has touched you in any way, please get in touch.
Absolutely. I think the biggest part of any advocacy or being disabled or being a part of any community is finding those connections and people. So one, I will definitely be going to your website again and filling out or joining you for one of those sessions just for learning more because I think it's always good to hear from other people. And I do a little bit of everything, whether I'm working by myself or with a friend or at a part time job. So I feel like it's something I could take with me everywhere. And I encourage everyone to go check it out. Piecesofme.org, PEACES of me.org. And yeah, all the links will be in the description and show notes. And I encourage everyone to go check it out. reach out to Daniel, build the connection. You never know when you may need to talk to him. He's very smart and educated on this. He has many more degrees than I do, and way smarter than I am. I sit here and yap on the internet. He actually knows what he's talking about. So, Daniel, thank you so much for being here, and I hope we get to talk again soon.
Thank you, and likewise, it's been great chatting with you.